Hello everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth in the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. The Getaway. The door was waiting for him, already open for a quick entrance into the inconspicuous car. Tony ran as fast as he could, chucking the duffel bags full of money into the back as he more or less dove into the passenger seat. "Drive!" Tony screamed at Jackie. "Drive, goddammit! Drive!" Jackie. Scaletta did not need to be told. Before Tony had even entered the vehicle, he had popped the clutch into drive. Before the passenger door was even closed, he tore down the road like a bat out of hell. Tires screeched like a woman getting murdered as the unnoticeable but powerful car growled down Lexington Street. A traffic light had just turned red as the car ran through it, narrowly avoiding collision with an expensive luxury vehicle. The driver honked loudly, laying on the horn in shock and frustration. But neither Jackie nor Tony D'Amato gave it much notice. They were too fixed on the wailing of police car sirens already going off in the distance, coming after them. "We did it, Jackie!" Tony screamed more than said. "We just robbed Lexington Bank, the cream of the crop. We are gold, my friend." Jackie only nodded in reply. He was too busy focusing on the road, maneuvering cars, hopping onto the sidewalk and the wrong side of the roads to say anything. Tony was shaking and excited as a child who had just scored the game-winning touchdown in a pee-wee football game. But Jackie was calm and collected. A professional getaway driver, if there ever was one. Just a little bit further, we'll be over state lines. Then after that, on our way to Mexico to live like kings, Jackie. We did. Whoa, look out! A wall of police cruisers was creating a blockade to the entrance of the interstate. Tony grew nervous immediately. Visions of himself and Jackie being torn up by a barrage of Tommy gun fire flashed through his mind. Torn apart by bullets as they did to Bonnie and Clyde. However, Jackie had prepared for this. He knew what to do. "Hold on to something," Jackie said, with the coolness of an ice-cold killer. His face was determined, his eyes focused. "Hold on," Tony shouted. "Hold on to what?" He reacted just in time as Jackie popped the wheels on the shoulder of the entrance, scraping the passenger side of the car against the cement barriers that blocked cars from falling down the steep hill. "Fuck! Fuck! Fuck!" Tony shouted. Sparks flew like crazy fireworks off his side of the vehicle, he noticed with wide eyes. The getaway car had attacked the weak spot of the barricade. Cops dove out of the way in fear as the driver's side of the car clipped a police cruiser in the rear bumper. The collision was hard enough to knock the law enforcement car on its side. Gunshots fired harmlessly as the getaway car merged with the interstate traffic. The road to freedom. We made it! Holy shit! Jackie, you old son of a bitch! We made it! Tony hollered. He was shaking in excitement and fear. A bit of shock had also clouded his mind. He vomited quickly, but violently out the window. Calm down, Paisan, Jackie said calmly. We aren't free yet. Look behind us. Tony swore when he turned his head to see black and white cop cars following behind. Traffic had pulled over to the sides of the road to allow a path for the police to drive through. Tony had visions of Moses parting the Red Sea upon seeing this. What do we do? Tony asked, horrified again. You let me do my job, Jackie told his childhood friend calmly. You did your part. Now it's my time to shine. He gunned the accelerator once again. The engine of the car growled like a lion on the attack. Except they were the antelope, and the police, the lions. The rear windshield imploded with a sharp snap as glass fell to the floor of the car. They're shooting at us, Tony yelped. Another bullet hit the metal of the car's exterior with a loud knocking sound. Well, Jackie told Tony, like a father teaching his son a lesson. Fire back. Tony reached between his legs for the weapon. A Thompson machine gun with a 50-round drum loaded. He racked the first shot into the chamber, aimed intently at the leading cop car, and squeezed the trigger. The gun went off, sounding like a barrage of drums, vibrating off the walls. The car Tony had been aiming at lost control and collided with a semi-truck that was pulled over. One down. How many more to go? Tony asked himself in his mind. Good job, Jackie said calmly, still focusing on winding through the traffic on the highway. Most drivers had gotten the message and pulled off where they could. But a few stubborn ones kept on going like nothing was happening. Great. Now we have a cop murder to add to our list, Jackie's mind told him. He shook his head to clear the thought away. The car stank of burnt gunpowder, and a ringing accompanied the ears of both men as Tony loaded another drum into the rifle. Don't shoot unless they shoot first, Jackie spoke. Or if they get too close, even still, try aiming for the tires. Don't worry, I don't intend on killing anybody unless I have to, Tony replied. Jackie was thankful for this sentence from his friend. They weren't murderers. There was no one else Jackie would aid robbing a bank with. A bullet shattered a small hole in the windshield. It narrowly missed Jackie's throat. His blood went cold as he felt the ripple of air pass by his skin. A second one ripped another spot through the windshield. This one hitting its mark. Fuck, Tony yelped, throwing his right hand onto his left arm. Blood stained his fingers. Another barricade stood ahead. This 1-3 rows deep, with paddy wagons and cruisers blocking the interstate. Tony, Jackie shouted, momentarily taking his eyes off the path to look at his friend. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," Tony spoke through gritted teeth. "Just took some muscle and skin. Missed the bone. I need you to lay some covering fire when I say," Jackie told him. "What are we gonna do, buddy?" Tony asked. His pain was, at the moment, dulled by the fear that their escape had come to an end. No Mexico. The bullet would have to be extracted from his arm. "Just wait," Jackie replied, his voice getting lower and lower as he repeated, "Wait, wait, wait. Okay, now. Fire!" Jackie screamed. Tony leaned out the window and sprayed a barrage of bullets out of the end of the machine gun, aiming over the cops' heads. It was enough to scare the uniformed men to duck behind their vehicles as Jackie screamed the car over the grassy area between the lanes of the interstate, straightening on the wrong side as family cruisers and semi-trucks came dangerously close to head-on collisions with them. He rolled back onto the right side of the road once they had cleared the barricade, passing a sign that happily welcomed the two into the next state. "We made it!" Tony shouted. "Holy Christ, Jackie. You did it. We are clear. Bravo, paisano." They had made it into the next state. Tomorrow morning, they would ditch the vehicle and get into another one to make the drive into Mexico. They were not safe yet. There was still the worry of a nationwide manhunt or getting stopped at the border. But for now, Jackie Scaletta and Tony D'Amato were safe. They continued down the interstate, cuts like a knife. I look at the sign over the door. Beauville Historical Society, my new home. I am now an artifact, a historical thing. How have I gotten to be this old, this obsolete? Does anyone even use grinding wheels anymore to sharpen things? It has been a long time since I have felt anyone's hands on me. Prior to coming here, I had been sitting in a dusty old barn for years, unused, unloved. That is, until someone decided to move me. A tattooed young man wearing an earring, a stranger to me, threw me in the back of his pickup and brought me here, dropping me off unceremoniously at the front door. He then sped away as if he were relieved to be rid of me. I have to say that hurt my feelings. He slammed me down and didn't even say goodbye before speeding away in his monster truck with the jacked up wheels and loud muffler. I tried to look on the bright side. No use crying. Tears might make my metal frame and seat rust, although my heavy stone will be no worse for the wear. Chin up, I tell myself. At least now that I'm here, occupying a place of honor by the front door, perhaps I will be looked at and admired, if not used. I look around and spot other artifacts nearby, my peers. The first thing I notice is a horse plow, the kind that has a platform, really just a metal square, for its driver to stand upon while he steers the horses. I remember, back in the day, when my master had one just like it, pulled by giant, strong horses, a breed called Percherons. I remember it was a long, slow process. The horses were very strong, but sometimes hard to control. Nevertheless, the plow did a remarkable job, plowing deep, even furrows in the rocky soil. Next to the plow, there is an ancient piano with scrolled curlicues and whorls carved into its polished mahogany woodwork. There is no rhyme or reason to this crazy museum, Outdoor farm equipment is jumbled together with indoor furniture and other sundry items. The piano's deep, dark, polished wood is still in good shape, but the ivory has worn off its keys, making the keyboard look like a person with blackened or missing teeth. I suspect the piano needs tuning. I wonder if it even can be played. It looks like the kind of piano that has been sitting for years in someone's dark basement, with mice possibly making a nest inside. Alongside the piano, I spot a spinning wheel with a foot pedal, an ancient freestanding gas oven and stove with spindly legs, a roll-top desk along with an inkwell and feathered pen missing some of its quills, and other ancient worn items too numerous to mention. Like the spinning wheel, I also have a wheel, a circular, thick, heavy stone. The wheel is activated by a foot pedal, which causes it to spin and sharpen things into a fine point. The person doing the sharpening has to bend down and press the object firmly into my wheel for an extended period of time. It's a little bit like riding a bizarre bicycle. The ride is sometimes long and arduous. The user has to be patient, giving rise to the old saying of keeping one's nose to the grindstone to achieve good results. Back in the day, I was used to sharpen knives, axes, saws, really all kinds of things. It has been a very long time, however, since anyone has used me to sharpen anything. I honestly can't remember the last time I felt cold metal of any kind pressing into my hard stone. I am now over 100 years old, but am still in great shape, if I do say so myself. Still firm, solid. I can still sharpen with the best of them. I stand ready and willing to sharpen whatever comes my way, although I should have learned my lesson based on my past mistakes. I wonder idly if anyone cares about my abilities. What will they write on my informational placard? Will anyone even read it? Every object in the museum has a brief description displayed. I imagine the curator of the museum probably will stick to brief facts. How old I am, who owned me, what kinds of things I sharpened long ago. I think my viewers deserve a more exciting story, however. They deserve to know the truth. I should really write that story myself. Maybe I'm a tad conceited, but I would like everyone to sit up and take notice of what I can do. The results that can be achieved with a sharp tool or weapon. The results you see are really quite astounding and deadly. Once upon a time, a very long time ago, I sharpened something to a very fine, edgy point. That point was used for something dangerous. Although I am proud of my abilities, I must confess that I feel somewhat guilty about the whole thing. I guess you could say I was an accessory to a crime. My master, we called him Big John due to his immense size, came to me one day for service. He bent over me for hours, keeping his nose to the proverbial and actual grindstone, sharpening his favorite knife into a razor-fine point. The knife had a long, hooked blade. He kept it in a black leather sheath in the pocket of his overalls. It didn't look like the kind of knife a farmer should carry. It wasn't a knife for whittling, or cutting branches or barbed wire, or even gutting the catfish that swam in our creek. No, that knife was a weapon he kept in his pocket just in case. Big John was a hothead, you see, the type of man who always believed in carrying a weapon, convinced that he might one day need it. He was also on the prowl, not for a perceived enemy, but for a wife. He was convinced that the farm needed a woman's touch, convinced he needed to sire some children to carry on his bloodline. He was somewhat of an old-fashioned man, wanting an adoring little woman, and a whole passel of children surrounding him, working alongside him on his beloved farm. To achieve his goal, after a long, hard week farming, one Friday night, he took himself off to town, spiffed up in his best overalls. The knife occupied its usual sheath in his pocket. Big John had his eyes on a young barmaid named Sarah. Sarah was the daughter of the tavern's owner. She was a buxom blonde, cheerful and friendly, serving her customers with alacrity and a bright smile. She seemed to be a hard worker, keeping up with the demands of a rowdy, thirsty crowd effortlessly. Clad in a low-cut, frilled blouse and a flouncy skirt, she immediately caught Big John's attention. Being a practical man and a farmer, he noted with approval her broad, childbearing hips, swishing along as she carried a wooden tray filled with heavy steins of beer. Usually she could deflect the wandering hands of intoxicated, grabby men who got overly friendly when she served them their beer and whiskey. One man, in particular, an uptight, prissy banker with a gray comb-over on his bald head, would not take no for an answer. Forgoing her usual politeness, she slammed down his beer and turned hurriedly to leave, knowing that he would undoubtedly try to detain her. Sure enough, the man's whiskey breath was hot in her face, and he grabbed her around the waist. "Stop, sir. I need to get going." She forced a smile to dull her sharp words. "What's your hurry, darling?" he slurred, grasping her tighter. She once again tried pulling away, to no avail. For a man who sat behind a desk all day, his grip was surprisingly firm. Big John, who was sitting one table over, felt fury rising in his chest. He stumbled to his feet and quickly stomped over. "I believe the lady told you to remove your hands, sir." He choked out the last word. In his opinion, the man did not deserve to be treated like a gentleman. The good manners his mama had instilled in him prevailed, however, forcing him to be marginally polite. "What you gonna do about it, farm boy?" the man sneered. Sarah squirmed in the man's grasp, trying to pull herself free. Big John saw red. "Who you calling a boy?" "You, of course," the man said coolly. "I'm no boy." Big John spat. Suddenly, he pulled the knife out from its sheath in his pocket and brandished it menacingly at the banker. The man at last dropped his arms from around the barmaid's waist. "Whoa there, big fella. No need to get violent. Put that thing away." Big John continued to hold the knife. All at once, the banker's hand shot out like lightning, and he knocked the knife away from Big John. The knife clattered to the floor. The bar room was suddenly silent, its customers frozen in stupefied fascination at the scene rapidly unfolding in front of them. Both men bent at once to pick up the knife. Being smaller and more agile, the banker was the first to reach the weapon. He raised it in the air triumphantly, the knife's sharp metal gleaming in the candlelight, emitting an eerie glow. "Give me that back," Big John yelled. "Never!" screamed the banker. The two men were now struggling over the knife, Big John trying unsuccessfully to wrestle it away from the banker, who was surprisingly strong for a skinny, middle-aged desk jockey. In one last desperate attempt, the banker brought the knife down forcefully, stabbing it into Big John's thickly muscled chest. Big John made a horrible gurgling noise and fell heavily to the floor, the blood pooling around him. The metal part of the knife sank deeply into the big man's chest, only its black handle protruding. Yes, my friends, Big John died. I am sorry to say that my sharpening skills led to his demise. I never saw that coming. It still tears me up inside. When I first heard the news, I shed a few tears. Someone had to wipe me off with an old towel. They wondered if the barn roof was leaking at the time. Luckily, I didn't rust. Big John was a good man. May he rest in peace. He was only trying to protect his lady love. Maybe if the knife hadn't been so sharp, he might have lived. But no, he bled out, like a stuck pig. His parents buried him at the base of the big hill, down by the creek, on the farm, resting on his beloved land, the land he had hoped one day to pass down to his children. Sarah, the barmaid, came to his funeral. The children they might have had together never came to be. The knife, I am sorry to say, was never recovered. I don't know whatever happened to it. I am sure its point is just as sharp to this very day. I still feel guilty about the whole thing. My own pain cuts like that knife. When I do something, I do it right. Big John was the same way. If only he hadn't kept his nose so long to my grindstone. It's possible he just might have lived. Who killed Amu's son? A loud scream pierced the stillness of the night, and it sent chills down my spine. I heard someone crying in the neighbor's house. The time in the clock showed 12:45 a.m. I was here at my aunt's house, enjoying a long vacation. After my final year degree exams, I knocked on my aunt's door, knowing that she must be fast asleep after taking her medicines. My aunt opened her door, looking worried and groggy. I heard some screams from the neighbor's house. I think there is some problem. I am going there to inquire, I said. She said she would come too, as she didn't want me to go alone. It was warm and sultry outside. We started walking towards the house in the dim lights of the street, amidst the cloud calls of night insects all around us. My aunt lived in a small, beautiful village in Kerala, which was just an hour away from the city. Her only son had migrated to Canada a few years ago and wanted my aunt to join him. But she always refused, saying she was happy in her little village, surrounded by friends and relatives, and didn't want to be uprooted. The distance to the neighbor's house was not much. There were paddy fields all around, bordered by huge coconut trees, which were swaying in the mild breeze. It was a huge house, away from all the other houses that led to a long, narrow pathway connecting the main road ahead. The house belonged to Amu, a 70-year-old widow who had suffered a paralytic stroke. Few years back since then, had spent most of her time in a wheelchair. Amna, a middle-aged lady, was hired as a nurse, come companion, to take care of her, and she lived with Amu in the same house as she had no family of her own. There was a cook and a maid who would come in the morning and leave by evening. The lights were on in all the rooms, and the main door was open. We saw Amu huddled in the wheelchair, weeping bitterly, with Amna standing beside her. As soon as we entered, Amna came running to my aunt. She was crying, her face contorted with fear, saying nothing we could understand. My aunt calmed her down, and I went to pacify Amu, who was in a bad shape. Through their sobs, we gathered that Amu's son was lying dead in his room above, and it seemed someone had strangled him. My aunt was too stunned to react, and didn't know what to say or do. We just stood there, watching Amu and her nurse clinging to each other and sobbing. By this time, some more neighbors walked in, hearing the commotion. My aunt told them what had happened, and one of them called for the police. The police came in quickly with a doctor who examined the body and declared him dead. They took charge of the body and looked around for fingerprints and other clues. There were no fingerprints, as if the killer had wiped it all after committing the crime. An ambulance was called in, and the body was taken to the hospital for post-mortem. The police came down to interrogate Amu and the nurse. Amna said around 12 a.m. they heard Dev, Amu's son, enter the house as he had his own set of keys. They heard some voices. The son was talking to someone, but they didn't think much about it, as he was in the habit of bringing his friends home. And they would have another round of drinks, which would go on till wee hours of morning. She and Amu then went back to sleep. Amna always slept in Amu's room, in case she needed some assistance during the night. After a while, they woke up to a loud thud and heard footsteps running down the stairs. By the time Amna came out, the intruder was long gone. She found the main door was wide open. Sensing trouble, she called out to Amu's son, but he didn't reply, and so she went up to check on him. Except for a night lamp, all the lights of his room switched off. He was lying on the floor, motionless. She went near him and saw some ligature marks on his neck. Being a nurse, she recognized those marks. She checked his pulse and found none. She ran down screaming. Amu was devastated to hear the news and had been sobbing since then. The police turned to her to record her statement, but she was in no state to say anything. They said they would come again to interrogate Amu. They sealed the room and warned that no one should enter the scene of crime. It's going to be a long night, so you can go home and sleep. My aunt said. I told her I'm fine, as I wanted to be with her. We stayed with Amu the whole night. She was sobbing and calling out to her only child. A doctor was called in, who gave her a sedative that soon took effect, and Amu fell asleep. It was nearly 5 a.m. when we returned home, and none of us could sleep anymore. My aunt made us coffee, and we sat at the long wooden table in the kitchen, discussing the turn of events. She looked perturbed. She said, "It's the first time such a horrific incident had taken place. The village was very safe, and they all lived like one big family. I was aware of it, as I always visited her during my school and college vacations, and it was a second home for me. Amu's husband was a wealthy landlord, and he owned nearly a quarter of the total land in the area. Amu was a very pious lady who always helped the poor, and no one returned empty-handed from her doorstep. There was an orphanage for destitute children and a home for senior citizens, totally funded by Amu. She owned many paddy and rubber plantations, from where she earned all the income. Her only son, Dev, turned out to be a lazy scoundrel. I never got along with him because he was always arrogant and rude, even as a schoolboy. He never helped in the family business. He kept bad company and often picked fights with the villagers, and sometimes even misbehaved with the ladies of the village. People tolerated him because of Amu, or he would have been languishing in jail for some time now. He had raped a poor, innocent girl Minu from the village, who eventually committed suicide, and Amu had hushed up the matter by compensating the girl's family handsomely, asking them to leave the village. Everyone in the village hated Dev, being the only child. Amu had spoilt him rotten. She was blind to his faults and indulged him by fulfilling all his demands, and this took him further on the road of destruction. Too late, the consequences of her indulgence dawned upon Amu. Now she was keeping a tight fist on her money, which infuriated the son even more. And there were instances where he had raised his hand on his old invalid mother for money. Once he had hit Amu so bad that she had to be hospitalized for her injuries. But she told the doctors that she fell in the bathroom. He always treated Omna as a minion and left no chance to belittle her, which she ignored only for Amu. The next day, the police came to interrogate Amu. They said the post-mortem report revealed that the alcohol level was very high in the victim's blood, and he didn't put up any resistance to the murderer. They asked Amu if she suspected anyone. She said he had many enemies, and it was difficult to pinpoint any one person. "Are any valuables missing?" asked the policeman. Amu said she kept everything in the bank, except for a little money for her personal expenses in the house. The police ruled out robbery as a motive and felt it must be some personal enmity. They had also checked his call details, but did not find anything suspicious. The last rites of Amu's son took place the next day. Amu sat there, stony-faced and dry-eyed. The whole village had turned up for the funeral, more out of respect for Amu than for her son. The police summoned her son's friends to interrogate them. They told the police that they were all drinking together in the bar, and after some time, everyone left for their respective homes. Their call records were checked, their family interrogated, but no incriminating evidence was found against them. All the goons and miscreants from the village were rounded up for questioning, but the police couldn't find any concrete evidence against any of them, and they were let off as they all had cast iron alibis. They interrogated everyone from the village, including my aunt and me. The investigation progressed, but nothing much came out of it. The police returned after 2 weeks and told Amu that they have found no clue to conclude. It was an outsider's job. They wanted to interrogate Omna, the cook, and the maid again. The cook and the maid said they both had left the house in the evening. Omna repeated her same story, supported by Amu. The police did not argue much, and they left, saying they would keep the investigation on, and if they get any further information, they would let her know. Soon, a month passed, and it was time for me to return home. I booked my flight for the following Sunday evening, 10 p.m. I wanted to go and meet Amu, but she's still in a state of shock and wasn't meeting anyone. My aunt was feeling bad that I had to witness this horrific incident, but I assured her that I was fine. At 8 p.m., The cab driver called to say he was waiting at the end of the road to avoid the potholes and asked me to walk up to the cab. I didn't mind, as I had only one bag, and it wasn't much of a distance. I bid my aunt goodbye, promising to visit her soon, and started walking down the road. I walked past Amu's house, which was in darkness, except for a night lamp in the living room. Amu slept early, by 8 p.m., and no one was allowed to disturb her. Once she was in bed, I heard some voices coming from her living room. Thinking she was still awake, I peeped from the window to shout out a final goodbye. The sight inside chilled my bones. Amu was walking towards the staircase erect and without any support. She climbed the stairs and within no time disappeared inside the room. Amna was sitting near the lamp and reading a book. I was too scared to move or speak and stood rooted to the spot. I managed to reach the cab and literally collapsed on the seat. Throughout my journey, that scene haunted me. Amu could walk? Why was she hiding this fact? Was she the one who climbed up and strangled her son? Or was it Amna? Did they tell lies to the police that they had heard Dev talking to someone the night of murder? I was befuddled by all these questions and couldn't find any answers. I reached the airport by 8:30, checked in and sat down in a corner, lost in thought. Mr. Roy! Mr. Roy! Someone was shaking me rudely. I saw 3 policemen standing before me. I was wondering, why were they calling my name? You will have to come with us, as you're under arrest for the murder of Amu's son, Dev, one of them said loudly. Before I could react, they handcuffed me and bundled me into their jeep. My aunt was already in the police station, crying and looking at me in disbelief. How can you arrest me? Do you have any proof? I shouted. The inspector looked at me with a gleam in his eyes and asked me, do you deny that you know Minu? The girl who committed suicide after she was raped. Weren't you in love with her? Isn't it true, the moment you realized that Amu's son had raped her, you wanted to kill him? Didn't you come with a plan to murder Dev? He was throwing questions at me, one after the other, without waiting for an answer. The inspector said that after interrogating almost everyone from the village, he was perplexed, as he couldn't find any evidence against anyone. So, on a hunch, he went to meet Minu's father, who lived in another district. The father was still grieving his daughter's death. He told the inspector that his daughter was a talented artist and had received a scholarship from a reputed arts college, which had been her dream. He proudly showed all her paintings to the inspector. Among those paintings was one of mine, which the inspector instantly recognized. He asked the father about the picture. The father told him that his daughter was in love with this boy. And that moment, the inspector knew it was me. He said that night, I left the house after my aunt went to sleep, knowing she takes sleeping pills and won't wake up until morning. I waited for Dev outside his house and persuaded him to invite me in on the pretext of discuss something important. The moment we went to his room, I strangulated him. I pleaded with them that it's all just a bunch of lies and false implications. I can never murder anyone, but everything I said was falling in deaf ears. I wanted to tell them about Amu's secret, but no one would believe me. My mind was numb. I was trying to recollect the events of that night before I heard the piercing scream, but everything was blank. I couldn't remember anything. Was it possible that I had murdered Dev? I felt an icy grip squeezing my heart. The Horseman. The man on the horse was an odd one. I could tell that even as he angled his quarter horse into my beams like it was his turn in the center ring. An Easterner, which maybe 10 years earlier might have seemed even odder. Little dressier than the average rancher, handled his animal like he knew how, but had learned it someplace else. "Saw you from the rise," the man said. Easterner, all right. Kind of horse-faced fellow with a government haircut and a big nose that reminded me of the Jew families that had passed through the dust and winds in Pop's tourist camp on their way to California. Not that I gave a damn. Pop hadn't given a shit about God after he took Ma in 32. And so he likewise didn't give two shits about anybody's private dealings with the Lord with or without Jesus. No, it was the man's eyes. Big, calm, curious. "Do you need some assistance?" My old Nash 400 was running like a top on 4 threadbare but plump tires, and the trunk was flung open with the jack still clamped into place. And then there was the Indian blanket I got in trade for some janitor work at the last gas before the next last gas on the way to my pot of gold that had turned into a cesspool about 2 hours ago. Oh, and the shovel lying next to the blanket rolled tight like a Tulsa oilman's stogie on the dirt under the lip of the trunk. Even without Jesus putting his 2 cents in, it wasn't the way I'd been raised. But like I said, it was the eyes, unblinking even in my headlamps. And that slow smile he gave me as I pulled Pop's old Colt out of my belt and made him a third eye, like I'd done him the biggest favor in the world. I'd settled in Espanola a couple years after the Depression ended, though, or maybe cause I'd helped the town undertaker put a number of such folks under the shifting Oklahoma topsoil for a few pennies a body. I'd sought out someplace a little more off the path of men, desperate or stupidly hopeful enough to drag their wives and young ones through the valley of death to a pot of gold that didn't exist. But everything shrinks as we grow, my pop once said, and it wasn't too long until they started to trickle south off the California Trail into the desert. College types, engineers, they said, Easterners, Jews, I heard, and more than a few foreigners who weren't fooling anybody with names like Henry Farmer and Nicholas Baker. Now, I'd never been out of Oklahoma before Pop's lungs finally gave out, and I dug one last grave this time for free, and I'd sure as shootin' never met any Germans. As at the time we had an axe to grind with Mr. Hitler, I was a sight more than nervous about the funny voices with the funny names sidling up beside me at the local watering hole on a Saturday night. Didn't help that the government had bought out the ranch school and put me out of the first steady work I'd had since sorting the dead from Pop's barely paying guests. The school and its high-flown Eastern teachers and rich folks' kids playing cowboy seemed a bit silly to me, but groundskeeper's pay was decent, and the Ponces treated me right. Felt no desire to stick around afterwards, even with the new jobs the government and their engineers were bringing to the area. What the Easterners and foreigners specifically were doing may have been the best-kept secret in the Southwest, but the tighter you keep the lid on the pot, the bigger the mess when things boil over. All anybody could guess was it had to something to do with that aforementioned scrap with Der Fuhrer. But folks got rattled with the army and the federal suits, cleverly watching every move the locals made. Bad enough, they were keeping Nazi prisoners and Japanese folks from California on ice down south at Fort Stanton. Seemed passing strange we weren't rounding up Germans and Italians who could blend right in at any military base or shipyard, but my 2 cents wasn't going to buy me anything but trouble, especially these days. The Denver and Rio Grande Western had ripped out the Chile line and pulled the tracks from Espanola in '42, but the town was hanging on between the nearby farms and the new government jobs 10 miles to the west. I was a handy sort with nowhere really to go, so I hung on too in what passed for the middle of nowhere. If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. I think that's in the Old Testament, or maybe some tourist dropped that pearl on me on their way to the new promised land. As I now headed the opposite direction, back through Espanola and north past Taos into the mountains near the Colorado border, I could feel God's jeering presence. Poor time to get religion, with 2 bodies stuffed in the trunk and a ticket to hell waiting at the station for me. When I think about it, and believe you me, I have, maybe that's precisely the time. I put them deep in the Carson forest. It was a skill I thought I'd put behind me. But even the dead can surprise you. I was in my bed a few hours before dawn, contemplating and shivering on the bare mattress. It was sheep country. I could get a new blanket in the morning, though at this moment I wasn't sure of the need. Barring rattlers, the horse was the only one got off free that night. Hitler willingly gave up his ghost in the spring of '45, and his pal Mussolini got a date with a firing squad and a public showing strung up like the day's catch outside a Milan filling station. It took close to 3 more years to rein in Hirohito. After destroying the Japanese Navy and taking a string of Pacific islands, hemming the empire in nice and neat, we rained fire down on Tokyo, Osaka, Hiroshima, and Fukuyama. I say we, although I spent most of my stint with the 124th Transportation Battalion in Luzon, up to my elbows in axle grease and sweat. I'd signed up 2 months after that night in the forest, reasoning only more blood would wash away what was on my hands and my soul. I was pretty much nobody in the middle of nowhere, and when no GIs or Eastern-looking fellows in suits and badges showed up on what passed for my doorsteps, I figured Uncle Sam had chalked things up to Nazi spies, or an unlucky turn on a dark plateau trail, or maybe Junior, as I'd come to call him, just bugging out. It was those goddamned eyes. He seemed like a man looking for a back door out of purgatory. Wonder if the sergeant at the Santa Fe recruiting office spotted anything like that in my bloodshot brown eyes. See, thing with being nobody, having nobody in the middle of nowhere is the company you're forced to keep. Nobody was ever likely to find the bodies, and nobody was likely ever going to spill a tear over the man who'd soiled my good blanket. But every time I listened to the bodies piling up on the radio, I wondered how many others I'd buried. Just what was it that midnight Horseman had been up to at the old ranch school, with his army of eggheads with phony names and their army keeping the whole town under wraps? And why did most of the lot just pull up stakes a few weeks after? Had to be some kind of secret weapon, blow the Krauts and the Japs off the map, my guess? For one bleary moment, I thought my brain had contracted TB and an Irish brogue, but it was one of the Denver and Rio Grande Western's Gandy dancers who'd lost a knee and his toes and the works in between to a 3 p.m. coal car maybe 15 years ago. It hadn't broke him of the whiskey. He read too many of those cheap detective magazines with the gumshoes and masked crusaders and flying saucers and half-naked women about to be sawed up, or worse, and I'd had my wits about me. I'd have heard him creaking down the planks and cleared my stool. "And what makes you think that?" I asked, 'cause it was the noise I needed. "My sister's boy. He does some plumbing and odd jobs for them mad scientists down the road." The old man wheezed. "Seems like everybody's in an uproar over the boss fella gone missing a few weeks back. Seem to think there's spies all about, Nazis or commies or some such. Young Danny happened down the wrong hall, and the soldier boys there grilled him near to medium well." "Boss?" My voice went up a couple notches, but he was too stewed to notice. "Some Jew scientist from California supposed to be grand muck-a-muck of the whole operation. Jingleheimer, Weisenheimer, something like that. Some of the talk is, this Jew might be the spy." He leaned in on the half-leg and grabbed my sleeve as a thick cloud of coffin varnish sent me reeling back. "Now, you think about it, boyo. Why you think every man-jack's knickers are in such a knot, lest something big was in the works? You ever hear of atoms? You know, the stuff what we're all of us made of? Well, I hear tell Hitler and his boys have found a way to split them atoms, to just rip all of creation apart. Unless we get there first and blow the fella to hell first. Little wonder them Nazis would want to rub out Dr. Jingleheimer." He then toppled from his stool. I caught him halfway to the floor, jostled him back into place, and made for the door. Crisp desert night outside, the moon too close and stars scattered across the black, nothing like atoms torn asunder. I jumped in the Nash, somehow made it alive back to my shack, and packed for my penance. Recently leaked revelations allege the U.S. Defense and State Departments largely falsified published reports that Nazi Germany and Russia were on the verge of harnessing atomic fission as a potential weapon against America and its European allies, purportedly to spur Allied physicists to escalate development of such an atomic bomb to bring about a speedier surrender by Hitler's forces. That effort, referred to as the Manhattan Project, was conducted under a nearly impenetrable cloak of military security on the site of a former boys' academy near Los Alamos, under the auspices of preeminent theoretical physician J. Robert Oppenheimer. Without revealing the nature of his work, Oppenheimer's mysterious disappearance late one night in 1944 sparked a massive manhunt, and rumors the eccentric scientist had collaborated either with the Germans or the Russians, given his wife and brother's ties to the American Communist Party. The case remains open to this day, and the Manhattan Project ended shortly after Adolf Hitler's suicide and the effective fall of his Nazi regime. Amid the loss of one of its most brilliant minds and fears of further security breaches, the remaining physicists of Los Alamos declared the project a failure. Or so we thought. I talked this week with Isidore Isaac Rabi and David L. Hill, former Manhattan Project researcher. In a 60 Minutes exclusive, Rabi and Hill reveal for the first time that they and other project scientists concerned about the long-range implications of atomic warfare conspired to conceal their findings from the military. Rabi, Dr. Oppenheimer himself voiced doubts about the sanity of releasing such a force into the world, but he was under intense pressure to beat Hitler, beat Stalin to the punch. None of us knew we alone held the keys to a Pandora's box, but without Robert's zeal, we reached a hard but crucial decision. There are questions which illuminate, and there are those that destroy. I was always taught to ask the first kind. The only answer to the question of the day was destruction. If not merely the instantaneous vaporization of entire cities and the then unquantified after effects of ambient radiation, then the geopolitical stranglehold and atomic arms race between the US, Russia, perhaps even the former People's Republic of China would impose upon the human race. And imagine if such a weapon were deployed. There would be no defense, no deterrence, only annihilation. Robbie was awarded the 1944 Nobel Prize for his discovery of nuclear magnetic resonance, a major breakthrough in medical imaging and diagnosis, and his work in microwave technology revolutionized military and commercial radar systems and led to the introduction of the home microwave oven in the mid-1950s. Meanwhile, following the dissolution of the Manhattan Project, project team member David Hill headed up the Federation of American Scientists, later to become the Global Federation of Responsible Scientists, with the overthrow of Joseph Stalin and subsequent collapse of communism across Russia, Eastern Europe, and Northern China. Under Hill's leadership, the Federation worked with the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission and other international agencies to design virtually fail-safe atomic reactors, which have all but replaced coal-fired power facilities and have been credited with greatly reducing air pollution around the planet. We reached Dr. Hill at his Santa Fe home. Hill continues to defend Oppenheimer's patriotism and loyalty, as he has since President Truman branded the missing physicist a traitor in league with communist factions. Hill. The consensus was that the specter of atomic warfare and destruction would come to eclipse any prospect of science in the public interest. We've harnessed the power of the atom to save lives and provide clean, safe energy. I posit we'd never have put men and women on Mars, nor developed a seamless worldwide web of satellite communications and technology had we created a world occupied solely with averting global apocalypse. Wallace. Not everyone concurs with your assessment. Retired Major General Boris Posh, who headed up the investigation into Oppenheimer's disappearance in 1944, argues you and your colleagues withheld vital scientific information that might have ended the war 4 to 5 years earlier, saving, in his words, countless American and civilian Japanese lives. And to this day, Posh believes Oppenheimer was complicit, either in your deception or acts of espionage. He's pushing the Justice Department to bring formal charges against what he called the Manhattan conspirators. Your response? Hill. Mr. Wallace, I'd invite you to imagine a football stadium filled to the rafters with all those American, British, Australian, Russian, Japanese casualties. Then imagine dropping a bomb that would wipe out an area 5, 10, 100 miles around that stadium. Then look ahead at the radioactive wastes that would linger in the air above that area for months, possibly years, that might carry across 100, possibly thousands of miles. Multiply that by as many bombs as it might take to prove we mean business. As for Dr. Oppenheimer, you have to understand the exhaustion and stress we were all under. Robert's way of dealing with that pressure, his doubts about the work and its consequences, was to ride the mountain trails around Los Alamos, through the Sangre de Cristo and the Jemez mountain ranges. He loved New Mexico, and he loved his horses. We were on the verge of a key breakthrough at that point, and he vanished shortly after supper. Most of us knew where he'd probably gone, and when they found his horse wandering around the plateau about 3 miles off, we figured he'd met up with some kind of misadventure. Dr. Oppenheimer would never have let that animal to languish in the wilds. That was something General Groves and his men would never understand. It was a small item on the Sunday news feed, but the Tao's byline had caught my eye. A massive flash flood had uncovered, and a trio of hikers had discovered what looked to be the skeletal remains of 2 adult males, one wrapped in the shreds of a decomposed wool blanket. A couple ribs shattered by one bullet, another bullet found rattling around in his companion's punctured skull. They'll surprise you, all right. And with them, the rest comes surging back. The soldiers, the flyers, the privates and colonels and generals, the moms and dads and sons and daughters caught in the Spitfire, the moms and dads and sons and daughters snared in limbo, merely for being the face of the enemy. or a fair enough approximation. The odd horseman with the tortured eyes who'd suffered such indignity and injustice for taking a midnight ride. I'd taken a single souvenir that night in the forest, secreted it away to the Pacific on the second great California migration to find that golden pot in the airplane plants and the aeronautics trade. Tucked it in a bedroom drawer through a marriage, 2 sons, a funeral, and 2 graduations. Buried it deep packing for that one final job far, but not far enough away. Now, it seemed, was the time. It had been a tough week in the field, and I'd hoped to catch the satellite feed of 60 Minutes and maybe Columbo, but this finally seemed the time. I set the yellowing badge, number 76, I guessed how the brass kept track of their college boys, on top of the TV monitor, trying not to look in those damnably damned eyes this time. Bye, JR. Then I wrote this for you, whoever you wind up being. You can see the right people get it. Then I think I'll step out for a bit of air. The desert is beautiful at night, especially in the high beams of a double moon. How to rob a library. Harry was ready. Harry hated books. The plan was simple. If he robbed the library, there would be no books to read. No books equals no library. Even if the library wanted to buy new books, they would have no place to put them. Phase 10 of the plan was to burn the library to the ground. The mission was ready to go. Phase 1. Knock out any guards. You will need fry pan and 2 ropes. The guards wouldn't stand a chance. There were only 2 of them anyway. What harm could they do? The answer to that was a lot of damage. The guards had been trained in the martial arts, so if you stood in their way, you were burnt toast. Good thing Harry wasn't bred, or the mission would be even more difficult. He slowly crept through the bushes, holding his fry pan in one hand and the rope in the other. Soon he saw a light getting close. A guard was coming. Piece of cake, Harry thought. This was going to be fun. Ding! The guard fell down to the floor, so he was tied to a tree. 1 down, 1 to go. Slowly, Harry crept out of the bushes and looked around. Where was the guard? "Hey, you! Stop right there!" called a voice from behind him. Time for real fun. Harry swung the fry pan through the air, and with a thunk, it came to rest on the guard's head. Thud. Time for Phase 2 of the plan. Phase 2. Disable the security cameras. You will need the pickaxe to be sure that no one found him out tomorrow. Harry would have to hide a lot of evidence, like knocking out the guards. All he had to do was smash all the cameras around him. There were about 20 of them scattered around the place. Number 1. Harry threw the pickaxe through the air. Bullseye. Number 2. It spotted him before he saw it, but no evidence remains now. Number 3, 4, 5, 6. Too easy. Number 7. Whoever designed this must have thought that 1-year-olds were the only criminals around. The rest were too easy to be recorded. Time for Phase 3. Phase 3. Shoot a window on the top floor of the library. You will need a gun Harry took a deep breath. He got one shot at this. That was all. If he missed, he would have to reshoot. Then it would be more likely people had heard the shots and come to invigilate. Ready, aim, fire. Bang. Smash. The shot couldn't have been better. The window shattered instantly. Time for Phase 4. Phase 4. Climb up the library. Don't do with adult supervision. You will need a rope. Harry took a deep breath. It was time to climb. Using all of his force, he threw the rope up to the smashed window. Then he began to climb up the library. Error in the plan. It has recently rained, and the building is now very slippery. There was no safety gear added to the list. A slip will result in being in a coffin. Harry was about halfway up the 10-meter-high building when the error came into place. He tried to take another step. He slipped and fell. Luckily, he grabbed the rope just in time, so he got away with just a few scratches. So much for a library being a safe place for kids, he thought. Finally, he reached the top. It was time for Phase 5. Phase 5. Take down the librarian. The librarian will never leave its post, not even after hours. You will need glue and the remaining rope. Harry looked around, knowing the librarian could be anywhere, watching him. He got to work covering the floor with glue. It was going to be a sticky trap to fall into. Time to do the fun bit. Make noise. One thing you should know about librarians is they hate noise. Shh is one of their favorite words to use. So, noise would be the bait to the trap. Harry counted to 3, and then, boom. He rejected at the top of his voice. A second later, he heard footsteps coming towards him. "I'm over here!" he cried. The librarian turned around and scowled. "Come here, boy." She yielded, taking a step forward. Squelch. She soon found herself glued to the floor. Now it was time to tie her up, just for the fun of it. Time for Phase 6. Phase 6. Rob the books. You will need a sack. Harry did that immediately, so I won't record that. Phase 7. Get ready to set the fire. You will need some of the stolen goods and petrol. Fun was rising in Harry's soul. Time to get ready for the fire. He walked up to the tied librarian and grinned. Then he ripped some of the books to shreds. Then he sprinkled them all around the room. That was just the beginning. Time for the petrol. Harry ran around the room, pouring it everywhere. The librarian looked furious. That made Harry feel a sense of achievement. Phase 8. Make sure the librarian won't get killed in the fire. You won't need anything. Harry walked up to the librarian. "I'm sorry, miss, but I'm going to have to throw you out the window," he said. The librarian looked furiously at him. Did you not know that a librarian never leaves its post? She screamed angrily. Oh well, thought Harry, so be it. Phase 8 has been cancelled. Phase 9. Make sure you can escape easily. You will need a safe place. Harry looked around the room. He couldn't go through the window because the rope would catch fire. He couldn't just stay here, though. He had to do something. It was then that Harry realized that there was a door to the library, so he could just escape through it. Too bad it can't be a bit dramatic, he thought. Phase 10. Light the fire. You will need the matches. Flick. Harry struck the match. Then he walked over to the petrol. Then he set the fire. He now had just 3 minutes to escape. Fire was already everywhere the eye could see. It was time for the next phase. Phase 11. Escape the library. You will need lots of luck. Without looking back at the screaming librarian, Harry raced downstairs. The fire chased him the whole way. It didn't stop until Harry wasn't out of the library. By now, the building was alight in the darkness, so the firemen and police would be here. Phase 12. Throw the sack of books in the river. You will need the sack of books. Harry raced down to the cold, dark river. It was time to get rid of the books. Without hesitation, he threw the books into the murky depths. He smiled as he watched them go. Phase 13. Act innocent. Sirens wailed as the police came to the scene. Time to do the job. Harry walked right past the police, and they didn't notice. Who would expect a kid to break into a library and murder someone anyway? For more information on how to do damage, please go to your local library, if it hasn't been burnt down, and find more of our how-to guides. The Prankster, Lennox, was the golden child to a set of loving mother and father who believed her to be the most auspicious thing that ever happened to them. They never reprimanded her for her childish pursuits, let alone denied her anything she ever wanted. An army of helpers were always at her beck and call. She pulled immature pranks and toyed with them to her heart's content. Her impishness was further encouraged by her parents, who laughed it off her as a sign of childishness and immaturity. Asher, Freddie, and Sarah were all Lennox's best friends. They belonged to well-off families and were as unruly as Lennox. They were all indifferent to the pain their actions might cause to the person at the receiving end. A boy named Austin was the current target of Lennox and her gang. Austin lived in the servant quarters along with his father, who was a driver at Lennox's house. He was a nerdy and ambitious kid who wanted to support his father when he grew up. Lennox often instigated him to join her gang, but he politely refused because he was aware of the activities they indulged in. This made Lennox despise him, and she decided to hit him where it hurts. She stole the extra key of the servant quarters from her mother's bedside drawer and located the books she often saw Austen reading passionately. She set all of the book on flames, which left poor Austen crying bitterly. This was just one incident of the many that followed. Once Lennox's parents shrugged it off as a mistake. With the passage of time, Lennox became more obstreperous and even started talking back to her teachers when they rebuked her for her rebelliousness. Her partners in crime always did as she said and supported her in her petty pursuits. One day, Lennox was playing catch with her friends. One of her friends dared her to throw the ball as high up in the sky as the overhead rooftop of the adjoining house. Lennox, being the competitive girl she was, immediately accepted the challenge and flung the ball with all her might. But the wall hit the glass casement of the house, resulting it to crash into pieces. Lennox had failed to complete the dare. She headed towards the house to collect the ball, fuming with anger. She rang the doorbell. It was answered by an elderly woman whose gray hair was neatly tied in a bun. She was wearing a thick-rimmed black frame containing bifocals. She gave Lennox a sneering look and remarked angrily, "You broke my window, you insolent little brat. You will never get that ball. Get out of here. Shoo!" She shut the door with a loud thud that made Lennox flinch. Lennox returned to her house with her cheeks turned crimson red with anger and embarrassment. Her friends, who bore witness to the whole scene, were snickering at her, adding insult to the injury. "I'll make the old hag eat her own words and beg for forgiveness." She vowed to exact vengeance on the poor old woman who was her next target. The next morning, Lennox and her gang hatched a devious plan that would extinguish the fire of revenge ignited inside Lennox's heart. They dug up some information on the old woman and found out that she lived alone in that big house. They had decided to make a fool out of the poor old woman by making her come to a realization that her house is haunted. They made their way towards the old woman's house in order to execute their seemingly flawless plan. Everyone hid behind the car, parked right outside the house. According to the plan, Asher ran towards the house and rang the doorbell as many times as he possibly could, and Quickie joined his friends, who were hiding behind the car. A few minutes later, the old woman poked her head out of the gate and muttered something under her breath when she didn't find anyone standing on the other side of the door. She shut the door with all her might, which made a loud, banging sound. Lennox felt amused at her frustration. This process was repeated thrice till the old woman was heaving tiresome breaths and sat on the pavement outside the house with beads of sweat forming on her forehead. She bent down and struggled to pick up her staff, which showed clear signs of exhaustion. A few moments after she went back into the house, Lennox declared that she would bang on the door this time, instead of ringing the doorbell. She headed towards the gate and started banging on the door with all her might. A few moments later, she heard a loud thud and the sound of a piece of wood falling on the ground. Curious to find out what had happened, she looked through the peephole of the gate and gasped as soon as she saw the old woman lying flat on the ground, along with her staff that had a significant tear in it as a result of impact with the ground. Lennox immediately rushed towards her house and narrated the whole incident to her mother in one breath. Her mother was shocked. "I am very disappointed in you, Lennox. I have always ignored your childish pranks because I thought you will eventually learn on your own that it is not okay to hurt people just for a few laughs." Her mother reprimanded her while calling the nearest hospital for an ambulance. The old woman was rushed to the emergency room. The doctors revealed that she had minor heart attack as a result of a strenuous activity. Lennox came to the hospital every single day to see the old woman, but she didn't have the guts to meet her. After a week, she finally found the courage to make amends for her mistake. She bought a colorful bouquet, a brand new staff for the old woman. When she arrived at the hospital, she came to know that the woman had left the country with her son, who had recently come from Italy. Lennox fell down on her knees and started sobbing. At that moment, she vowed to never pull pranks on anyone. She returned home and apologized to Austin and all the other people she had wronged throughout her life. Moral: in an attempt to satiate our ego, we often end up hurting people beyond repair. The mistakes we've made. Content: warning, some swearing. The only problem with breaking into your neighbor's house is if someone else beats you to it. The Mastersons are gone for the month, summering in Fiji or Acapulco, or wherever people go when they're filthy rich and can afford to flaunt it by using words like summering. Before leaving, they'd asked me to watch their house. For free, of course. I smiled and told them they had nothing to worry about. It wasn't until their blue Bugatti sped down our dead-end street that I finally uncrossed the fingers hiding behind my back. Burglary 101. A good heist is all about patience. For 2 weeks now, I've spent night after sweaty July night sequestered in my stuffy attic with my telescope trained on the Masterson house, their backyard swimming pool, their organic vegetable garden, their novelty chicken mailbox. Think Rear Window. Only I'm not as handsome as James Stewart. Why wait so long? Because breaking into someone's house the first week they're on vacation is so predictable. And the second week, even less subtle. But the third week, no one ever suspects that third week, which is probably why, right now, during the middle of the third week, as I'm zipping up my black coveralls and adjusting my ski mask, as I'm stooping down to peer through my telescope, which has become a worse habit for me than day drinking, I can feel my heart free fall its way to the basement. Across the street, the shadow of a person creeps toward my neighbor's veranda. It's almost midnight. Everything is dark outside, like a chocolate cake when you don't bake it right, and the person shines a dim light in front of them. I hold my breath as they reach the door's smart lock. Their fingers bounce around the keypad with all the dexterity of a fat kid in a confectionery shop. Then the numbers light up, and the door swings open, and they slip inside the house. I wait a few more minutes, expecting to see a light bulb spark to life in one of the windows, when the place remains unlit. I grab my cell phone and a black hefty bag, and then I'm off, gliding across my house to the front door. Think risky business, only I'm not as smooth as Tom Cruise. I'll be honest with you. When I arrive at the Mastersons, fulfilling my promise to watch their house is the furthest thing from my mind. Really, I just don't want whoever's inside to take all the good shit before I get a chance. The smart lock keypad awaits my touch. My fingers move with all the dexterity of a fat kid running a mile. But the numbers still brighten, and the door swings open, coaxed by the passcode that I'd obtained after several months of attic telescoping. Inside, the house is as dark and chocolate cakey as outside. The scent of vanilla lingers in the air, sprayed every 15 minutes via one of the house's 1,000 automatic air fresheners. From the kitchen comes the sound of a cabinet being opened, wine glasses clinking. Using my phone's flashlight, I make my way toward the noise and hope whoever's in there hasn't yet discovered Mrs. Masterson's 60-piece bone china dinner set. I'm not sure what exactly you're supposed to say to someone who's hunched over and dumping a whole drawer of silverware into a burlap sack. So I aim my flashlight at their back and settle for a classic. Hi, how's it going? Nice and casual, not too confrontational, with a hint of politeness. Maybe I am as smooth as Tom Cruise. My words come as the last knife in the drawer hits the bottom of the sack. In an instant, the person drops both drawer and sack, grabs something from their waist, clicks a button. Blue light appears like magic. A thin strand of electricity crackles to life. Pointing the taser gun at me, she shouts, "Put your hands up, and don't fucking move." I'll be honest with you. I've always thought people who talk about love at first sight were full of it. But now, standing there in front of this woman, because there's no doubt the voice belongs to a woman, I get what they mean. Think of the most beautiful woman you've seen. Sandra Bullock, probably. Then imagine her standing there, pointing a stun gun at you in your neighbor's kitchen. Legs like a desert oasis, curves like a rainbow, brown hair flowing down her back as she straightens her trigger finger. Because that's exactly what this woman is like. At least, I imagine so. She's wearing a black latex catsuit and a matching ski mask that make her look formless in the veil of night, even in the taser's blue glow. Not 1 inch of skin showing, but sometimes a voice is all you need to really know someone. That's how all my previous relationships have started, with a voice. And those were nice while they lasted. Whoa, 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 I say, taking a few steps back and turning off my phone's flashlight to show her I'm harmless. I come in peace. Who are you? The words bubble like acid rain. My feet take another step back without asking my brain. The taser is still aimed at my chest. I'm the Mastersons' neighbor. I point vaguely in the direction of my house. She starts to close one eye like she's about to open fire, so I add, and believe it or not, I'm here to do the same thing you're doing. Slowly, finally, she lowers her weapon, so now it's aimed at my crotch. It's a small victory. I take what I can get these days. I want her to trust me, so I run my hand along the wall in search of the light switch. If she could only see the hefty bag in my hand, she'd know where we stand. At last, the switch pricks my thumb, and all at once, we're bathed in pure white light. Cut that shit off, she hisses. And it's like Jesus himself said the words. They sound so beautiful. And so is she, probably. But the light switch clicks, and it's dark again. She looks out the window, swivels her head from end to end of the sidewalk. Then she taps a button on her taser, and the blue crackling is gone, replaced by a regular flashlight, which she shines directly in my eyes. Are you trying to get me caught? Sorry. Unbelievable, she mutters, and crouches to pick up her burlap sack, leaving the silverware drawer on the floor. The sliver of moonlight from the window makes her look like an angel. An angel who's approaching the 60-piece bone china collection with my name on it. I rap on the wall twice, and it works. She stops, turns to face me. The moonlight reveals only the left side of her ski mask. Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot, I say, peeling off my own mask with one hand and offering a truce with the other. I'm Mac, by the way. She stares at my proffered hand, like she doesn't want to contract whatever form of leprosy I have. The night air is a blanket, heavy and warm around us, filled with the songs of crickets and cicadas. We stand there, listening to the house groan under our feet. Above our heads, the ski mask feels like a dumbbell in my hand. This is usually the part where you tell me your name. No, the woman says, arcing her taser flashlight across the adjoining living room. She marches to the baby grand piano in the corner, no doubt trying to devise a way to wheel it into the night. Okay, I'll just call you Jenny, I say, following her. That was my last girlfriend's name, which is information that was supposed to stay in my head before my mouth sabotaged me. But now it's too late. The words bridge the space between us, like a Chinese finger trap, binding us together as accomplices. She pauses, one hand poised atop a stack of outdated sheet music. Beethoven or Bach or Mariah Carey. Turning around, she stares at me behind her ski mask and opens her glossy mouth. It doesn't matter that she showed up to a robbery wearing lipstick. It doesn't matter that she almost tased me 2 minutes ago. My heartbeat quickens all the same, and my blood rushes to places where it probably shouldn't be. Slowly, finally, she says, "Shut up, Max," and dumps the music into her sack, Mariah Carey and all. And it doesn't even matter that she got my name wrong. She could read the yellow pages, cover to cover, and I would listen forever, falling asleep and waking up to the sound of her voice every day. So, yes, I shut up. We shuffle to separate corners of the living room and inspect our potential treasures. And let me tell you, it's the longest 5 minutes of silence in my life. But then, as I'm snatching a handful of angelfish from the Masterson's aquarium and tossing them into my garbage bag, curiosity creeps up on me like it's driving a free candy van. And I can't help but to ask, how did you get past the smart lock anyway? It took me weeks of watching with my telescope to get the numbers. I cringe hearing the word weeks, a hasty overcorrection, when I opted not to tell her how long my spying has actually been going on. Jenny scoffs from across the room, where she's trying desperately to pry a taxidermied deer head from its throne above the mantelpiece. Really? You couldn't figure out 1234? She turns and gives me a dismissive shake of her head. They're boomers. It's not frickin' rocket science. Another candy van question slips out. Why are you doing this? She sighs and stops tugging, but keeps her hands on the antlers. I'm just taking what I'm owed. That's all, she says. Her voice is different than before, softer maybe. I mean, seriously. These people can go to Acapulco for a month, but they can't afford to pay their employees a decent wage. So it was Acapulco, I murmur. You know something? I'd probably be home right now watching Netflix if Ed weren't so fucking stingy. Whether she means Mr. Edwin Masterson or Mrs. Edna Masterson, it's impossible to say. And I don't feel it's my place to ask. I see. What about you? Janny has given up on the deer head, opting for the floor-to-ceiling bookshelf instead. They aren't paying you right either. I could tell her the truth, that the Mastersons have never wronged me, have always invited me to their cookouts and their Christmas parties, that I'm just a guy with too much time on his hands, all the time in the world, and something to prove, that I'm invading someone else's life tonight to try to find some meaning in my own. That I'm a spineless, indecisive loser, and I'm destined to let the world walk all over me. That last one is what my previous girlfriend told me anyway. Old Jenny. But that was 3 years ago. People can change in that amount of time, right? I would never have thought of breaking into this house 3 years ago. If that's not change, I don't know what is. New Jenny is staring at me, awaiting my answer. Yeah, something like that, I tell her, plunging my hand back into the aquarium. Figures. She flings a tattered Gutenberg Bible into her burlap sack. Hypocrites. Cat. Burglary 201. Always use the toilet before a heist. When I return from the bathroom, couldn't have been in there more than 5 minutes. The living room is abandoned. From the kitchen comes the rattle of a teacup and a saucer. And then I know this woman is no angel. In the kitchen, Jenny stands on her tiptoes to reach the top of the cabinet. She curls a few fingers around a piece of Mrs. Masterson's bone china, a white teacup with floral patterning. It is the penultimate item in the cabinet. What the hell are you doing? I say, as she lowers her body, cup in hand. My voice, louder than expected, ricochets off the now empty walls like a pinball. She startles, then slips her present into her sack. A reverse Santa Claus. What does it look like? You're taking my bone china set is what it looks like. Jenny shrugs and points to the lone piece in the cabinet. A plain-looking white saucer with gold trim. All yours. Have at it. No. I grab my soggy, hefty bag from its spot by the aquarium, stretch it as wide as it'll go. Give me half. The air freshener on the wall vomits vanilla mist as Jenny cocks her head. So, she says, nodding at the cabinet. Do you want it or not? Half, I demand. She snorts and shakes her head. Done with me. Hauling her sack, she troops down the hallway toward the bathroom. I have to stop myself from grabbing her arm. The equation is simple arithmetic. She has a taser. I don't. The saucer is an orphan in its cupboard, waiting for someone to take pity on it. It's cool to the touch in my longing fingertips. My hefty bag is still gaping like a hungry, hungry hippo. But I slide the saucer in my breast pocket for safekeeping. The toilet flushes, and Jenny emerges from the bathroom, still dragging her riches. She frowns when she sees me standing there. You know, I think I misjudged you, Jenny. You're not an angel at all. You know that? Her laugh is like the curtains bulging from her sack, velvety and hideous. Oh, I'm not an angel? Breaking news? More at 11. Her taser flashlight falls on my trash bag. What? You think you're some kind of saint? These people aren't my neighbors. I'm supposed to be watching the house, actually, I confess. That's really why I'm here. Mr. Masterson put his faith in me. Well, you're doing a great job. Jenny opens a hallway closet and inspects Mrs. Masterson's collection of mink coats as though she's in a bookstore, contemplating life's hardest decision. Paperback or hardcover? Let me know if you need a letter of recommendation. My face feels like it's summering in Acapulco. The novelty of Jenny's sarcasm has worn off. Now it leaves me grinding my teeth. Look, I'm gonna step outside, I tell her, tapping the imaginary vape pen in my pocket. I need a smoke break. 10 minutes, max, Jenny commands, with all the authority of a Walmart manager. I'm still wondering if that meant maximum, or if she'd simply mispronounced my name again when I stumble out into the night. A hot, gentle breeze greets me on the sidewalk, a gift from the passing cars on the next block. My house sits across the street, pale and lonely and devoid of bone china. The telescope in the attic is pointed directly at me, watching. The Mastersons' novelty chicken mailbox taunts me. They are all waiting for me to do what it is I actually came out here for. Why not? Why not fulfill my promise? Just so she can walk away with my dinner set while I get to drag some dead fish home. It only takes a few taps of my phone. Then a voice on the other end comes through, high-pitched and much too perky. 911. What's your emergency? Hi. How's it going? Yeah, hey, my house is being broken into right now, I say, and pray this woman doesn't know what Mr. Masterson sounds like as I give her the address. She's got a mountain of questions for me high as Everest, and I listen to myself answer them. Only I'm talking on autopilot because I'm too busy thinking about the two Jennys, old and new. How old Jenny would have called me spineless for what I'm doing now, turning someone in while being part of the problem. How new Jenny came here tonight because she wanted to right a wrong, because she believed in something. At least one of us has a good reason. And that gets me thinking, she can't be all bad, right? Maybe not an angel, but not all bad. She did let me have the last saucer. Maybe we just started off on the wrong foot. Maybe we could get to know each other better. Maybe then she'd even tell me her name. The operator is still talking a mile a minute when I interrupt. Hold on, I think there are 2 people in the house now. Yes, another one just joined. And when I feed her the Mastersons' address again, I whisper, please come quickly. But I'll be honest with you. That last part is for dramatic effect, just to see how long it'll take someone to show up to a fancy place like this. 5 minutes? 10? What do I care? I have all the time in the world. The operator tells me it won't be long, that they're sending someone right now to come help. She asks me to stay calm and remain where I am. So I stroll to the front door. I can hear Jenny's voice before my feet touch the porch, cussing one of the Eds out as she lugs her sack across the marble floor. Her bone china jingles in the night like a plea, begging my lone saucer to partake. I retrieve it from my pocket, give it a squeeze, and step inside, ready to see the mistakes we've made. Farmhouse Dinner. Christina wondered how long she should wait before she reported her husband missing. 2 days seemed too soon, but a week too long. Who would take a whole week to notice their husband missing? She held her hot cocoa in both hands, sipping it slowly as she watched the gentle flakes drifting through the pine trees. The first cold snap of the season had come with several inches of snow, and it covered the ground in a white, soft blanket. She loved being alone in her kitchen, and had spent the morning rearranging her utensils, the pots, and her knives for practical use. Everything had a place, and a place for everything. Christina looked around her small house, the contour of her entire world. She didn't miss him. The house felt lighter, cleaner since he walked out the door that last time. Did she even want him back in her life? She frowned. She had to get back to work. Mick's words rang in her head. Stop standing, get working. Mick couldn't abide her standing still. Everyone and everything on the farm had to have a use. Mick, of course, accepted. He could sit around and drink, complaining the world had it in for him. She put on Mick's thick flannel jacket, much better than her own, only slightly too large, and checked on the chickens, tossing seeds to them, then the few sheep, all safe in the barn. She looked around at what needed fixing, potential improvements. New opportunities for the old equipment clicked through her mind, adding to the long list. She lifted a bale of hay high to drop in the feed chute. The years of farm labor had made her body strong. Once back inside, she looked in the refrigerator. The meat she had pulled out from the deep freezer had thawed, and so she added spices, putting it in the oven with yellow potatoes and peas. She wiped the clean, pristine counter, then looked around at the sparkling kitchen, frowning at the lingering cigarette smoke smell, still recognizable underneath the pine sol she had dosed the room with. It had been 3 days since Mick had walked out of the door, and that seemed about right. She sat down at the kitchen table in front of the phone on the wall, smoothed her faded blue gingham dress as if they could see her, then called the police. My husband Mick is missing, she said, surprised at the real tears rolling down her cheek. She did miss Mick, his warm body and his gentle laugh. She missed him like she missed being a little girl when she would wear pretty dresses, dreamt of a prince to marry, and her future loomed bright on the horizon. Except those days were gone, just like Mick. What if they actually found him? She had new dreams now. Coffee, officers, or hot cocoa, maybe. Christina's voice met the officers as they walked into her warm kitchen, a powder of snowflakes on their dark uniform jackets. They introduced themselves as they came in. Detective Sergeant John Maloney. Tall and thick with a jaw like a dump truck, he stomped his feet on the stoop before ducking into the house. Behind him, slight and pretty, with her blonde hair pulled back tight in a bun, Officer Kelly Marks stepped inside. That's quite a road to get here. Lucky we had my 4x4 Bronco. Your little Jap car would have never made it through. D.S. Maloney's voice boomed in the small house, looking over at Officer Marks, who just grimaced at the repeated joke. Thanks. D.S. Maloney took a coffee, and Officer Marks took a hot cocoa with a Gracie has. I speak English. So, you are Christina Santos, and you called about a missing person. A Mickey Mouse, maybe? D.S. Maloney laughed with both thick hands on his hips, his elbows waving, the international flags of asshole. D.S. Maloney snorted at his joke. Both women's eyes stayed on the floor. His name was Mick, Christina said in a low voice. Mick, your husband, has been missing. Officer Marks looked down at a small, pristine notebook. For 3 days. Yes. Christina wiped her eyes with her apron. Mick went out, said he wanted to get something from town, but his truck is still here. Sometimes he goes to a neighbor's house or the bar in town. Oh, I don't know. Christina clenched her apron over and over. Did you look for him or call anyone? D.S. Maloney barked. I don't know who to call. I don't know his friends, other than the men at the Iron Door in town. I called the bar, but he wasn't there. Okay, do you have a description? Officer Marks held her pen at the ready. We can call the local hospitals, other police stations to see if he has turned up. Well, he's a bit taller than me, has dark hair and thicker. She put her arms out, forming a large belly. And his face? Christina squinted one eye closed and turned her face into a deep scowl. Oh. Officer Marks turned away with a frown. Mean mug. Any idea where he could be? D.S. Maloney looked in a cupboard, as if the missing man had been put with the canned peaches instead of the tins of sardines. Maybe he was walking in the forest, chasing a dog or a deer, and he fell and broke his leg. Christina mimed her leg collapsing, hopping, and then, in the snow, she wrapped her arms around herself and shivered. Or a wolf got him. Her strong hands turned into a biting wolf, attacking Officer Marks's arm, who leapt back from the snarling, yapping fingers. But most likely, he'd just run off, tired of me. Christina's chin fell into her chest. D.S. Maloney and Officer Marks caught each other's eyes. I'll check outside. You look around in here. D.S. Maloney leaned into Christina's face. It's okay we look around, right? Nothing to hide? Officer Marks meandered through the house, rubbing her finger on a shelf and then looking at her dustless glove. She opened a tall door in the kitchen, then her eyes went wide. She pulled a broom out of the closet. What's this? D.S. Maloney walked back in. The new snow covered any possible evidence. I found the meat freezer. You're well stocked for the winter, so that's good. I didn't see much else. Officer Marks held up a well-used broom with dark red coloring on the end of the handle. My broom, Christina offered. Is this blood? D.S. Maloney took the broom, his eyes blazing. Sometimes. Christina's hands squeezed her apron against sharing her secret shame. Mick used that if the kitchen wasn't clean enough. Officer Marks looked around the kitchen with her eyes raised. We're going to test this for blood. You want to change your story? No, you can see. Christina pulled her hair back to show a gash, dried blood still dotting the wound. I cleaned up the rest. She collapsed in a chair. Mick used to be helpful, but we lost so many sheep with the scrapie outbreak. Then with his drinking, I wasn't allowed to leave, just work the farm. Mick wanted me to do so much, but he did nothing but drink and curse and hit. Christina fell into deep sobs, her face in her apron. He just wasn't any use, don't you see? D.S. Maloney looked away, then his nose lifted into the air. Well, that smells good. What is that? Christina looked up. That's dinner. I thawed some meat. I needed to cook it. She stood up and looked in the oven. It's done now. I can't eat it all. I had hoped Mick would come home for dinner, but... Christina pulled a long roast out of the oven, the meat pulling back from the bone. Rosemary and thyme filled the kitchen with the aromas from the well-cooked meat. Do you want some? We can't let anything go to waste on a farm. D.S. Maloney looked at Christina, his eyes narrow, and then smiled. Heck yeah, I'm starving. Sitting at the table, he had a large napkin tucked into his shirt collar, a knife in one hand, a fork in the other. We can't do any more searching now. It is too dark and cold. He belched, loudly. This is real good, by the way. I have an idea. He pointed his fork at Officer Marks. Back at the station you call around, hospitals, other police stations. I bet he's in someone's drunk tank sleeping off a bender. Good idea, sir. Officer Marks's eyes swept the ceiling before turning to Christina. I thought this would be lamb, since you have a sheep farm, but it is something different. Christina looked up. Her mouth dropped open before she clenched her teeth. Pig, she muttered. A little tough, but pretty good, I agree. She stood up and went to her refrigerator. I have more. She pulled out several bundles and rolled and taped butcher paper. Here is some ground meat. I can't use it all. You should take it. D.S. Maloney pulled off his napkin as he stood up and took the packages. We'll contact you when we have anything further. He nodded and left the kitchen. Officer Marks jumped up to follow D.S. Maloney outside. Sir, there was obviously a fight in that kitchen. I read a story once about a wife who killed her husband with a frozen lamb chop and then fed it to the officers who came to interview her. Do you think? D.S. Maloney narrowed his eyes at Officer Marks before shaking his head. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard of. There is no body. No, he just left. Not that I blame him. She's not all there. He spun his finger around his ear. Officer Marks stepped back inside. Christina stood at the sink, washing a large meat cleaver. We're going to go. Thanks for the meal. Officer Marks headed for the door, then turned back. You know, I had the craziest idea that you killed your husband with that meat you served us to get rid of the evidence. Christina's mouth dropped open. Oh, that would have been so much easier. Christina shook her head and leaned back into the sink to get to work on the dishes and her new life, the Breakfast Murder Club. A hush fell upon the gathering at the large clover-shaped mansion that Lucky the Lucky Charms leprechaun lived in. The guests looked in horror and sadness as they saw the body of the effusive leprechaun floating in the large clover-shaped pool that was located in the courtyard of the luxurious estate. Tony the Tiger, Toucan Sam, Count Chocula, Frankenberry, Buzz the Honey Nut Cheerios Bee, and Snap, Crackle, and Pop all stood silently staring at the corpse. While their first impulse was to consider it an accidental death by drowning, something about the mangled nature of the body didn't add up. Casting even further doubt on the death by drowning theory was the large metal blade protruding from Lucky's back, with blood flowing freely out of the wound and into the pool water. After a long and agonizing silence, Buzz was the first to speak. Looks like we got ourselves a serial killer on our hands, he giggled. Buzz, that's not fucking funny, Crackle yelled at the floating bee. We have to figure out who did this. Can we make sure he's really dead? Snap inquired. I mean, we don't know for sure, do we? I don't think he's alive. Toucan Sam flew over the pool to examine the corpse from above. He's not breathing. He flew back to his room and retrieved a large life preserver shaped like a red Fruit Loop, then tossed it into the pool next to Lucky. But there was no movement from the leprechaun. Come on, Lucky. The body still did not stir. He's dead, Tony lamented. But who would want to kill Lucky? Count Chocula asked. Lucky didn't have an enemy in the world. Well, that's not totally true. Pop shook his head. I can think of a few people who would have wanted to do away with Lucky. Like who? Frankenberry asked as he retrieved a pool skimmer and attempted to push Lucky's body toward the side of the pool for retrieval. Well, for starters, how about his children? Lucky had quite an estate and lots of estranged children thanks to his fondness for Irish hookers. Those kids always chasing him in the commercials? They were his own offspring. They were always after his lucky child support payments. Yes, Lucky was loaded, Buzz blurted out. He had it all. Cash, stocks and bonds, Bitcoin and doubloons, pots of gold, Swiss bank accounts, and real estate investment boons. But I didn't see any kids come into this house today, Sam interjected. Or anyone else, for that matter. He paused. Let's face it, one of us is the killer. The rest of the mascots stood silent for a moment. Finally, Snap ventured a comment. So, which one of us would have had a motive to kill Lucky? We were all his friends, his most trusted buddies. We've all been through thick and thin together. Whether we work for Kellogg's or General Mills, we've all had the same goal of selling the world's children onto delicious, sugary cereal, so they don't end up with that bland, nutritious oatmeal their parents want them to eat. How could any of us stoop to something like this? Well, there's one mascot here I think could have done this, Sam proposed. He pointed at the Frosted Flakes guru. Tony. He's had it in for the beloved leprechaun for a long time. Hey, I wouldn't kill anybody, Tony protested. Oh, you wouldn't. Frankenberry sneered at the large cartoon tiger. Like you didn't make your displeasure known about Lucky's Asian safaris that you claim are decimating your kind, especially with your criminal history. Remember all those game hunters they found outside your house? Those maulings were expunged from my record. Tony frantically tried to steer the accusations elsewhere. It was probably the toucan who did it. That's right, Buzz agreed. Remember, Sam, how you threatened Lucky on social media and you had to put out a public apology before Kellogg's would let you appear in commercials again? Sam leapt to his own defense. Well, he was nasty to me, too. He said that Fruit Loops were nothing more than gay Cheerios. He should have been kicked off of Twitter, too. He's guilty, Tony exclaimed as the other mascots took a harsh eye to the toucan. Tony, Pop yelled at the tiger. This isn't one of your stupid commercials. Why do you always talk like that? I had a stroke, Tony declared. This is a total witch hunt, Sam screamed. If I killed Lucky, you think I'd just leave his body in the pool for everyone to find? I'm a fucking bird. I could easily take him anywhere to dispose of the evidence. He looked around at his accusers. It was probably Chocula. Lucky had the goods on him, and the Count knew it. The crowd gasped, turning to the chocolatey vampire, who backed away slowly from all of them, except for his ward, Frankenberry. I don't know what you're talking about. I did not do anything. Lucky did not have anything on me. Oh, yeah? Sam sneered at the Count. You knew that Lucky knew about your holdings in cocoa production companies operating in West Africa. Lucky knew that you were profiteering from child slave labor, using children to produce the chocolate used in your cereal. He was going to go to the papers about it, and he also knew about your little dalliances with European figures of royalty and your alleged ties to murderous East European strongmen like Vlad the Impaler and Ivan the Terrible. But what really made Lucky decide to come clean with everything he knew about you was a laptop he found in your castle, proving your involvement with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. You, sir, have a long and very bloody history, and Lucky was about to blow it all up for the world to see. That is why you killed him. You seriously did all of that? Snap gaped at Chocula. You should take a good hard look in whatever it is you vampires use instead of a mirror." "I did not kill Lucky," the Count vigorously declared. "And all that stuff is also a lie. Lucky vanted to frame me because I was always his biggest competition for cereals with marshmallows shaped like weird crap in them." "I think we need to examine where the three little elves stand with all this," Frankenberry said. "Snap, crackle, and pop. Maybe one of you snapped, then another one of you cackled, and then the third of you popped." "Okay, what's our motive?" Pop asked belligerently. "Lucky and us go back many years. Us little guys gotta stick together, you know?" "Like you never had it in for the little leprechaun who works for your rival company," Buzz buzzed. "He always beat you in the little people's competitions at the breakfast conventions. Plus, his cereal always did better with children aged 6 to 18, especially in those from wealthier households." Snap sniffled. "Yes, he was our whimsical little rival. But that doesn't mean any of us would kill him. If it was anybody here who did it, it was probably the pink monstrosity standing over there." Frankenberry frowned as the crowd turned in his direction. "Me? Screw you, you little elf. I would never kill Lucky." "Oh, yeah?" Snap asserted. "Like you never got into Lucky's face about all the rumors he spread about you, about the name of your cereal meaning it contained genetically modified berries." Frankenberry shook his head sadly. "Yeah, I guess it did hit me below the belt when he told people that. My sales went down over 20% because of him. Also, Lucky did sleep with your wife," Chocula added. "She said sex with me was like sleeping with a corpse," Frankenberry cried. "Well, I can't help that. I'm made of corpses. The hell was she doing with that little Irish runt anyway? His pecker is probably the size of a matchstick." "Whoa, I think we best move on," Sam suggested. "Wait a minute. We never talked about Buzz. Our flying friend here had a very good motive to off our beloved leprechaun." "Okay, I see where this is going, but I am not the killer," Buzz screamed. "Yes, Lucky interfered with my efforts to spread awareness of the threat to honeybees. He'd go around saying horrible things about my people, that we're all dangerous, invasive species who sting people for fun. He kept showing everyone that damn Wu-Tang Clan video where the killer bees attack New York. He even tried to convince Michael Bay to produce an action or horror movie called Night of the Bumblebees, all because my cereal beats his among the 18 to 34 female demographic." "That's not the only reason," Sam insisted. "It's well known in the industry that Lucky also encouraged the worker bees in your hives to unionize. Apparently, work conditions at your company are so bad that many of your employees have jumped ship to work for Amazon and Walmart. I mean, God forbid you provide your employees with full dental." "What the hell do my bees need dental for?" Buzz countered. "They don't even have teeth." "Okay, enough," Crackle yelled. "This isn't getting us anywhere. It's clear that almost all of us had a motive to kill Lucky, but obviously only one of us actually did it. We have to start looking for clues. We need to check any video surveillance of the pool, examine Lucky's wounds, get an autopsy done, anything that might clue us in on how and when he died, and who was with him when he expired." No sooner did he finish talking than all the lights went out. The courtyard area was suddenly shrouded in darkness, with none of the mascots being able to see anything, despite some of them normally having excellent night vision. Then, only moments later, the lights came back on as quickly as they turned off. Everyone shrieked in horror as they saw Crackle laying on the ground, covered in blood and not moving. "Crackle!" Snap screamed. "Who did this to you?" "The killer has struck again!" Tony exclaimed. "We have to find out who did this!" Toucan yelled. "Everyone, follow my nose and stick together." Suddenly, a voice was heard from inside the house. "Ahem, everyone. If you'll turn your attention to me, I think I know the solution to this perplexing mystery." The gathering turned their heads to see the newcomer, Captain Crunch, emerge from the mansion and into the pool yard. "Captain!" Pop cheered. "What are you doing here?" "I came here earlier, saw what happened, and have been investigating the house ever since," the captain chuckled. "I've become quite adept at sleuthing ever since my court-martial from the Navy forced me into early retirement." "So, who was the killer?" Frankenberry asked. "And was it the same person who murdered Crackle just now?" Crunch took a whiff from his pipe. "Just calm down, and I will explain everything. First, here is an explanation of how it might have happened." How it might have happened. "Tony did it," the captain announced, pointing at the shocked tiger in a fit of rage. Earlier today, he and Lucky were out by the poolside bar making chit-chat, and the conversation turned to health and nutrition. Tony repeatedly mocked the idea of marshmallows being considered a breakfast food, to which Lucky stated that marshmallows may not be a nutritious food, but that Tony was an endangered species and his mother was a whore. Tony immediately and swiftly murdered Lucky, inserted a knife into the body, and threw it into the pool to cover up the telltale slash wounds, and then bribed Buzz to kill the power using his stinger so that he could make an escape under cover of darkness. But when everyone gathered at the pool instead, Buzz had to sneak away in order to cut the electricity. Tony then took advantage of the darkness to kill Crackle, before the others could start searching and find out it was him who performed the dastardly deeds. "How dare you! It wasn't me!" Tony exclaimed. "Captain," Buzz belted out, "maybe you should stop with your bullshit detective work and go back to manning those glory holes or whatever else it is you did that got you kicked out of the Navy." Captain Crunch was undeterred. "Those are the facts, I'm afraid. As ugly as they may be, we have a double murderer and an accomplice amongst us right now." "You both are going to jail for this," Snap cried in between shedding tears for his lost companion. "The hell I am," Tony snarled as he bore his fangs belligerently. "You real deed." He leapt up and pounced onto the ground, roaring and throwing his claws aggressively at the other mascots. "You don't want to mess with the eye of this tiger," Buzz declared as he pointed his stinger at the crowd and prepared to dive bomb into them. "'Cause believe me, you won't be a survivor." "Well, this is all a fun little romp," Captain Crunch announced, just as the fracas was about to go into full drive. "But it isn't actually how it happened. How about this? How about this?" "Toucan Sam is the culprit," Captain Crunch proclaimed once the mascots were all at his attention again. Lucky was about to publish a memoir detailing Sam's troubled history as a cocaine addict. Sam was afraid the revelation would cause parents to boycott Fruit Loops and tank sales of his product. So he waited until Lucky was alone in the pool yard, then pecked him to death with that long, fruity beak of his. The rest of the mascots were shocked, but Sam did not attempt to deny the accusation. "Well, yes, Lucky did meet his end with me. But aren't you forgetting about your little part in this, oh Captain, my Captain?" When Captain Crunch did not respond, Sam was quick to continue. "When Captain Crunch arrived at the scene, I knew he would figure things out. So, I blackmailed him into covering up this crime by threatening to reveal to everyone his association with Jeffrey Epstein. So while we were all arguing back here, Crunch cut the power so that I could kill Crackle and take the heat off of myself for long enough to smuggle Lucky's body away from the house. But guess what, Captain? Our deal is off. You weren't supposed to reveal yourself in this manner, and now we're both fucked." "I too can." "That is so," Captain Crunch proclaimed. "There is indeed a lesson in all this. Blackmail and hidden secrets are tempting to use, but are as dangerous to their wielders as they are to their targets. But do not despair, Toucan, for that is also not how it happened. Here is the real solution to this mystery." What really happened? "No one killed Lucky," the captain announced. "In the interval before his body was discovered by you all, I conducted a thorough examination. Though it may look like foul play, his death was actually caused by drowning as a result of acute alcohol poisoning, brought about by his ethnicity, as well as his despondency over losing yet another child paternity case, this time to a Brooklyn mother of 4. The rest of the serial mascots murmured. "But then why was the body still in the pool, with the knife in his back, when we found him?" Frankenberry asked. Suddenly Crackle rose to his feet, brushing himself off as he laughed. "Thank the captain's cunning for that one," he cackled, as Captain Crunch glared at him with eyes wide open. "Crackle, what the hell, man? You totally stuck the knife in my back." "Give it a rest, Cap. You did that yourself." Crackle started licking up the ketchup he had covered himself with as part of the ruse. After the autopsy, Captain Crunch put the knife in Lucky's back and threw it into the pool to make the scene look like murder, sullying the reputation of the other serial mascots, enough to make people forget about his court-martial, which was hurting sales of Crunch Berries. I was in on the scheme as well, because he promised to help me convince the bigwigs at Kellogg's to bring back Rice Krispie Treats cereal, which we all know was the bomb. So I faked my death in order to make it look like a double homicide and allow Captain to declare himself a hero for solving the mystery. Plus, it would have allowed me to cash in on a very lucrative life insurance policy once I resurfaced under the brand name Rice Titties, the world's first pornographic cereal. "Then why did you just blow it all right now?" The captain seethed. "You and I were gonna be rich beyond our wildest dreams." I had second thoughts lying down here just now. I realized that no one really wants boobs in their breakfast cereal. Crackle shrugged. "So sue me." The rest of the mascots simply stood in silence for a moment. Captain Crunch decided to slip away quietly, to which no one else took notice. As the evening turned into full-on nighttime, they still stood in the pool yard without making a sound. "Well," Buzz finally said, "anyone want to go over to the Trix Rabbit's house?" He texted me that he just made some brownies that are very much not for kids, the bullet that Esther stopped. I shot Papa square in the heart, but he didn't die. That damn Bible he carried with him saved his life. I was considerable lucky that Papa had his axe at hand and that he kept it sharp. I picked it up. It was a heavy thing, so I swung with all my might and put it right through his head. Seeing his brains made me throw up. I moved away so it wouldn't get on Papa. That would be disrespectful. Papa was a big man. I couldn't bury him like that, so I started chopping off his arms and legs with the axe. I was down to the right leg when Sheriff Culverson showed up. Wouldn't you know it, he came to arrest Papa for stealing a couple of old lady Renner's chickens. Papa didn't have to worry about that now. Hell, he didn't have to worry about the drought or where his next bottle had come from either. I reckon I did him a favor, saving him from all that worry. Sheriff Culverson looked at me and looked at Papa. I done threw up again, so the smell was something terrible in the vicinity. I looked at the sheriff. He was a-shaking his head and had a sad look on his face. I reckon he didn't want to take a 19-year-old girl to jail. Especially me, seeing as how I was his daughter's best friend. Maybe he'll let Cassie visit me in jail. The jailhouse only had the one cell. That door a-clankin' behind me sounded like what Mama would call ominous. I kinda know what that means by the words around it. Corn-tex, I think they call it. I would know a lot more if Papa would have let me go to school. He said girls don't need school. They need to learn how to cook and to clean and to please their man. I'm damn good at cooking and cleaning, but I don't think I know how to please a man. Papa was a man and he was never pleased. Oh Lord, here comes the sheriff and another man. I seen him around. Mr. King. He's always all duded up and talking fancy and smiling and swinging his walking stick around. I sure would like to catch me a man like that. I bet he don't beat his women. Not much, anyway. He ain't smiling now. I reckon I'm in a heap of trouble. Welp, Papa won't be slapping the tar out of me for my sins this time. Both men sat across the table from Esther. The sheriff had placed the gun that Esther had shot her dad with next to the Bible that had thwarted Esther's original plan. The metal gleamed in the harsh light of the room, sitting as silently as the three occupants. The ceiling fan squeaked quietly, not doing a very good job of cooling off the room. The open window allowed the sunlight to stream through, and a soft breeze brought a little relief from the heat, along with the scent of jasmine and dust. The harsh, unforgiving angles that the sun cast in the room matched Esther's mood. Esther reached for the wounded Bible. She wanted to feel the torn cover and open it up to inspect the damage. The sheriff pulled it towards him and opened it up before sliding it to Esther. The soft sigh of the Bible moving across the table sounded like the whisper of broken dreams. Notice anything? The sheriff leaned back and watched Esther closely. Esther inspected the Bible. The bullet had torn through a significant portion of the Old Testament. It had stopped at the book of Esther. Yes, sir. Esther stopped the bullet, I reckon. Mr. King smiled, though he didn't want to. The sheriff nodded his head and leaned forward. Don't you find that a little odd? Esther shook her head. That's your name, young lady. Mr. King spoke. His rich, resonant voice filled the room. Dust motes danced and the breeze quickened. Yes, sir. The men looked at each other impassively, but both were thinking the same thing. The girl was thick-headed. Mr. King pointed to Esther's face. Your dad do that? Her black eye and a swollen nose did all the testifying for her. Yes, sir. Told me I should have caught a man by now, and he weren't gonna feed no old maid much longer. He been drinking? Sheriff Culverson leaned back, crossing his arms. He already knew the answer. Yes, sir. Mama always says that Papa only drinks on days endin' with a Y. I reckon that's true. Esther played with her hair, twirling it between two fingers. She looked away from the men and gazed outside, lost in her own thoughts. So you decided to shoot him? Yes, sir. But the Bible stopped the bullet. Yes, sir. Mr. Kind leaned forward and stared at Esther, causing her to blush. That was when you decided to take the axe to his head? Esther stopped playing with her hair and sat still for a moment before answering. I suppose so. Papa would have killed me if I didn't kill him. You feared for your life? Mr. King continued to stare intently at Esther. Yes, sir. Mr. King abruptly stood up and shook the sheriff's hand. I have all I need. He left quickly, so quickly that it startled Esther. She looked at the retreating back and worried that she had offended such a gentleman. Am I going to get the chair? The sheriff stood slowly, as if it hurt him to do so. He closed his eyes for a moment before answering. His voice, when he spoke, was softer than Esther had ever heard it. number you'll get 25 years in the women's prison in San Antone. Minimum. Esther started counting on her fingers. You'll be about 44, Esther. Damn. I reckon I'll be too old to catch a man by that time. The sheriff felt his chest tighten just a little at those words. And Mama? How old will she be? How old is she now? Esther paused, deep in thought. Says she was born in 1901. Then she'll be about 60. Esther nodded, standing and smoothing out her skirt. Reckon she'll take me back when I get out? The sheriff scratched his forehead and looked at the floor. I don't know, honey. I just don't know. Dusra. They're calling us heroes. The newspapers, that is. I suppose we are, but I don't know that I feel heroic. I do, however, feel a difference in me now that Papa's dead. Liberation would be the word. Papa would have hit me if I had ever used that word in front of him. Papa had been drinking, of course, and smacking Mama around. Cassie and I were hiding out in my room, wondering when it would all stop. At one point, I heard Mama scream. That's when I went out to investigate. Papa was pointing a gun at Mama. I didn't even think about what to do. I just did it. I stepped in front of Mama just as Papa shot. The bullet hit my Bible. Yes, I carried a Bible with me, right over my heart, but only when I was wearing overalls. It was fortunate that I was wearing them at this point. I staggered backward and fell. The impact of the bullet stunned me. Mama fell as well, trying to hold me up. That's when Cassie came charging out of the room and started to wrestle with Papa, trying to get the gun out of his hand. We heard another shot. Papa took a bullet to the gut. He died 2 hours later, in a lot of pain. Cassie stood and fairly sprinted out of the house. She came back a few minutes later with her dad, the sheriff. The look on his face was one that will not soon leave me. Pinched and drawn, with worry written clearly in the eyes. Mama should have never been home. She was supposed to go to San Antonio to see her sister, but Papa beat her so bad the night before that she refused to go. I believe that Papa beat her so severely so she wouldn't go. He was like that. Cassie shouldn't have been there either. Her father told her never to go to my house when my Papa was around, but Cassie often defied her father. Her father was so relieved that Cassie wasn't injured or killed that he never punished her. On the contrary, he hugged her tightly and kissed her on the cheek. I had never seen him do that before. I'm supposed to write a story for the newspapers. The one in San Antonio wants to give me and Cassie $50 each for our story. An astounding sum. Some rich people in San Antonio also want to give us full scholarships for college. Imagine going to college. It's in Denton, but that's even better. Cassie and I can get away from the blight of the hill country and experience a different kind of life. A different kind of life. I'm filled with a substantial happiness, and I wonder when it will leave. Never, I hope. The real hero is Mama, and I'll make sure the newspapers know that. All those years of insisting that I go to school, even when Papa beat her for her sass. He called it that anyway. It was grit and toughness and love. I'll call it the stuff that heroism is made of. That has a nice ring to it, and it's the truth. All 3 steps to the elevated porch squeaked under Mr. King's tread, though the man was not heavy. Like the rest of the porch area, they needed paint. Rusted nail heads poked out of the wood, loosened by years of neglect and hill country weather. The evening was soon to turn into dusk. Just spoke to the judge. Cassie ain't to be charged. He said she did us all a favor by shooting that man. Sheriff Culverson didn't show it, but a wave of relief flooded his body. He relaxed a little and felt his breath coming easier. Mr. King sat down and lit a cigar, offering one to the sheriff. Both men took some time to light their cigars, ensuring that they had a proper draw. This was not a task, but a ritual, and it was not to be taken lightly. The sheriff went inside his house and returned in a few moments, bearing a bottle of whiskey and 2 small tumblers. Each man filled their glass to the amount desired and sipped. Mr. King grimaced at the first sip, then took a second, larger sip. I reckon she did us all a favor, sure, but it was an accident. I'm damn happy the judge was of the same mind, the sheriff said. He took another sip of whiskey and sat his glass down, concentrating on puffing his cigar and enjoying the news. You know, I'm surprised one of those women hadn't killed the man before. He sure liked to beat his women, Mr. King said. The mama, the sheriff said. Mr. King turned his head slightly. Pardon? The mama. She made that girl, Esther, get an education. I hear she took a beating or 2 for her daughter. Damn fine woman, in my opinion. Mr. King nodded and smiled. He had already heard the news. You went to visit the widow, I hear. The sheriff glanced at Mr. King and then quickly glanced away. Offer my condolences in an official capacity. The sun had disappeared behind the horizon, bestowing faint light and beautiful colors to the sky. Fireflies came out of hiding, their pinpricks of light giving the large front lawn a magical appearance, as if fairies were in attendance, as if a miracle had been bestowed. You were there for 2 hours, Sheriff. That's a lot of, condoling. The sheriff turned and stared at Mr. King, his steely blue eyes narrowing a little. Mr. King laughed and hastened to explain. The old biddies in town, you know what they're like. Most of them had you and the widow making a baby during your visit. Vicious old cats, the sheriff spat out the words. Makes sense, though. You and the widow. Esther and Cassie are best friends. They'd be tickled pink to become sisters, so to speak. And the widow's a fine, strong woman. You done have us at the altar. Mr. King tamped the ashes from his cigar onto the porch and scuffed them with his boots. He poured himself more whiskey and watched the fireflies perform their chaotic, beautiful dance. Your wife's been gone for 12 years. I reckon you grieved enough, Sheriff. I figure the widow's grieving was non-existent. Can't really miss a man that beats you, can you? The sheriff poured himself another 3 fingers of whiskey and stood at the railing beside Mr. King. He sighed and turned to Mr. King, handing him a $1 bill. I'm hiring you for a 2-minute consultation, Mr. King. Mr. King looked at the bill and put it in his breast pocket. What's on your mind, Sheriff? The sheriff paused for a moment, trying to get the words out of his mouth. I heard Esther and Cassie talking one day last year, just before Christmas. Esther was telling her that she wanted to shoot her daddy dead so he'd stop beating her mama. Well, that froze me. Mr. King looked at the sheriff, a thoughtful expression creasing his face and pursing his lips. I figure she would have done it one day, Sheriff. I guess Cassie took care of that, though. The sheriff sighed. I reckon. So why the $1? We got attorney-client confidentiality now, right? Mr. King laughed, nodding his head. Yes, very clever, Sheriff, but I wasn't going to divulge that little piece of information anyway. I expect a receipt when you get to the office tomorrow. Yes, of course. Come by after work, Sheriff, and I'll buy us a couple of beers. I seem to have an extra $1 in my pocket. The night darkened and the breeze stilled. Even the fireflies slowed down. Soon they were gone. letting the darkness of the night have its way. Both men remained silent. Cigar smoke curled and drifted upwards past the porch lights, disappearing into the blackness. Mr. King left after finishing his whiskey. "See you tomorrow, Sheriff, and I'll expect a wedding invitation." "I want that receipt, young man." The rest of the night passed as it should have. Frogs croaked lazily, crickets chirped, and lights winked out one by one across the countryside. Two young ladies were dreaming of adventures at college. One sheriff was thinking of matrimony, and one widow was contemplating the mysteries of fate and providence. The Bible with a bullet hole in it was, in due time, returned to its rightful owner. The whereabouts of the mangled Word of God is currently unknown.